Kevin Johnson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stood in front of the moving truck parked in the driveway. The sun was high, casting golden rays over their new home in Tranquil Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled just outside the city. It was a fresh start for him, his wife Michelle, and their two kids, Marcus and Ava. They had dreamed of this moment for years, a chance to live in a peaceful place where they could raise their children without worrying about the noise and chaos of city life. Michelle smiled as she carried a box marked kitchen toward the house. Her dark hair was tied back into a neat ponytail, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. Behind her, Marcus, their 10-year-old son, dribbled a basketball on the driveway while 7-year-old Ava skipped around, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. The air smelled clean like freshly cut grass, and birds chirped cheerfully in the trees lining the street. Everything seemed perfect, but not everyone shared their enthusiasm. Across the street, an older couple watched the scene unfold with growing displeasure. Carl Hensley sat on his porch, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His face was red, partly from the heat but mostly from irritation. Beside him, Patricia Hensley leaned forward in her chair, squinting at the Johnsons as if trying to decide whether what she saw was real. "They're moving in," Patricia muttered under her breath, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Carl grunted in response, his lips pressed together so hard they almost disappeared. He didn't need to say anything. His expression said it all. To them, the arrival of a black family in Tranquil Heights wasn't just unexpected, it was unacceptable. The Hensleys had lived in the neighborhood for decades, long before the streets were paved and the houses painted in pastel colors. In their minds, it was their community, a place where people like them belonged. People who looked like them, talked like him, and shared their values, or at least their skin color. The idea of someone different disrupting that sense of order filled them with anger. As Kevin unloaded another box from the truck, Carl couldn't help but let out a low growl. "Look at him," he said, nodding toward Kevin, "acting like he owns the place already." Patricia nodded in agreement, her thin lips curling into a sneer. "It's disgusting," she replied. "What's next? More of them? Before you know it, this whole neighborhood will turn into, well, you know." She didn't finish her sentence, but she didn't have to. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Across the street, Kevin noticed the Hensleys staring, but chose to ignore them. He waved politely instead, flashing a warm smile as he called out, "Good morning." Carl stiffened in his chair, pretending not to hear. Patricia, however, shot Kevin a glare so icy it could freeze water. When Kevin turned away, she leaned closer to Carl and whispered, "Did you see that? He's mocking us, acting like we should welcome him here." Carl clenched his fists. "Don't worry," he said through gritted teeth. "We'll show him. This isn't some city dump where anything goes. He picked the wrong neighborhood to invade." Over the next few days, the tension between the two households grew thicker than the summer humidity. Kevin tried to be friendly, waving whenever he saw Carl or Patricia outside. Each time they ignored him, acting as though he didn't exist. But their silence spoke volumes. One afternoon, Michelle decided to plant flowers in the front yard. She knelt on the grass, carefully, arranging bright yellow daisies and purple petunias in neat rows along the edge of the driveway. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, enjoying the simple pleasure of making their new house feel like a home. Patricia appeared moments later, storming across the street with her hands balled into fists. She stopped abruptly at the edge of the Johnsons' lawn, glaring down at Michelle. "What do you think you're doing?" Patricia demanded, her voice shrill. Michelle looked up, startled by the sudden intrusion. "I'm planting flowers," she said calmly, gesturing toward the colorful blooms. "Why?" "This is a respectable neighborhood," Patricia snapped. "You can't just go changing things willy-nilly. These kinds of changes bring down property values." Michelle blinked, unsure how to respond. "Flowers bring down property values?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "You know what I mean," Patricia retorted, her cheeks flushing pink. "Your kind doesn't belong here. You're ruining everything." Before Michelle could reply, Kevin stepped outside, alerted by the raised voices. Seeing Patricia towering over his wife, he hurried over, placing a protective hand on Michelle's shoulder. "Is there a problem?" Kevin asked, his voice firm but polite. Patricia turned her glare on him. "Yes, there's a problem," she spat. "You people don't understand boundaries. Maybe it's time you learned." Carl emerged from their house then, standing beside Patricia with a smug look on his face. Together they formed a united front, radiating hostility. Kevin took a deep breath, refusing to let their rudeness rattle him. "We're just trying to make our house a home," he said evenly. "There's no harm in that." "No harm?" Carl scoffed. "You being here is harm enough. This neighborhood has standards and you're dragging them down." The confrontation ended when Michelle gently tugged on Kevin's arm, urging him to walk away. Back inside, she shook her head, exasperated. "Can you believe them?" she asked. "Who talks like that these days?" Kevin sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Some people never change," he said. "But we're not going to let them ruin this for us. We've worked too hard to get here." Despite their resolve, the Hensleys' behavior only worsened. Over the following weeks, they found petty ways to harass the Johnsons. Carl began parking his old pickup truck directly in front of their driveway, blocking access. When Kevin politely asked him to move it, Carl laughed in his face. "You want it moved?" "Move it yourself," Carl taunted. Patricia joined in, leaving anonymous notes in the Johnsons' mailbox accusing them of stealing opportunities meant for real Americans. Once, she even dumped garbage on their front lawn late at night, hiding behind a tree to watch as Kevin cleaned it up the next morning. The final straw came one Saturday afternoon when Marcus was playing basketball in the driveway. The rhythmic thud of the ball bouncing echoed through the otherwise quiet street. Carl stormed out of his house, his face contorted with rage. "That racket needs to stop," he bellowed, pointing a finger at Marcus. Marcus froze wide-eyed, the ball slipping from his hands. Kevin rushed outside, stepping between his son and Carl. "There's no law against playing basketball," Kevin said, keeping his voice steady. Despite the anger simmering beneath the surface, "It's disturbing the peace," Carl shouted. "And I won't tolerate it, not from trash like you." The argument escalated quickly, drawing attention from nearby neighbors. Some peered curiously from their windows, while others pretended not to notice. No one intervened. That evening, as the family sat together at the dinner table, the mood was somber. Marcus pushed his food around his plate, avoiding eye contact. Ava clung to her mother, whispering, "Why does that man hate us?" Michelle hugged her tightly, struggling to find the right words. "He doesn't hate us," she said softly. "He hates what we represent. Something different from him. But that's his problem, not ours." Kevin nodded in agreement. "We're not going to let people like him define us," he said firmly. "This is our home now, and we're staying." Though they vowed to stand strong, the incident left its mark. Fear crept into their daily lives, lingering like a shadow. Michelle double-checked the locks every night before bed. Marcus hesitated to play outside, glancing nervously toward the Hensleys' house. Even Kevin, usually calm and composed, felt a constant knot of tension in his stomach. Then, one fateful evening, the situation reached a boiling point. Kevin had installed a small wooden mailbox by the curb earlier that week, replacing the temporary, metal one they'd been using since moving in. The next morning, as he left for work, he discovered it smashed to pieces. A note lay crumpled nearby, written in jagged letters. "Go back where you came from." Kevin stared at the wreckage, his heart pounding. For a moment he considered calling the police, but something held him back. He knew how these situations often played out. Reports dismissed, investigations stalled, justice delayed. Instead, he returned home, retrieved tools from the garage, and rebuilt the mailbox stronger than before. That night, as he tucked Marcus into bed, Kevin kissed his forehead and whispered, "No matter what happens, we stick together. Love always wins." Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. The tension in Tranquil Heights continued to simmer, bubbling beneath the surface like a pot left on low heat. The Johnson family tried their best to go about their daily lives, but the constant harassment from Carl and Patricia Hensley made it nearly impossible. Every morning, Kevin would step outside with a sense of dread, wondering what new trouble awaited them. Michelle stayed close to home, keeping Ava nearby whenever she played in the yard. Even Marcus, usually full of energy and laughter, seemed quieter than before, his eyes darting nervously toward the Hensleys' house whenever he heard a car door slam or footsteps on the sidewalk. One day, as Michelle watered the flowers she had planted in defiance of Patricia's earlier complaints, Carl decided to take things further. He marched across the street, his boots thudding heavily against the pavement. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he approached Michelle. "You think you can just do whatever you want?" Carl barked, stopping a few feet away from her. "This isn't your neighborhood yet. You don't get to make changes without asking us first." Michelle turned off the hose and faced him, her hands steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said firmly. "These are my flowers and this is my property. I don't need anyone's permission to plant them." Carl sneered, leaning closer until his nose was almost touching hers. "You're making a mockery of this place," he spat. "People like you ruin everything they touch. Why don't you just leave while you still can?" Before Michelle could respond, Kevin appeared at the door, alerted by the raised voices. He hurried down the steps and positioned himself between his wife and Carl. "Back off," Kevin said, his voice calm but firm. "If you've got something to say it to me." Carl straightened up, glaring at Kevin with undisguised hatred. "Oh, I've got plenty to say," he growled. "You people never learn. You come into places where you're not wanted and expect everyone to roll out the red carpet for you. Well, let me tell you something. This is our neighborhood, and we won't stand for it." Patricia emerged from their house then, standing beside Carl with her arms crossed. She glared at Michelle, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're nothing but trouble," she said coldly. "Mark my words. You'll regret ever setting foot here." Kevin took a deep breath, trying to keep his temper in check. "We're not going anywhere," he replied. "And if you keep acting like this, maybe it's you who should reconsider your behavior." The standoff ended when Patricia grabbed Carl's arm and pulled him back toward their house. As they retreated, Carl shouted over his shoulder, "This isn't over, not by a long shot." That night, the family gathered in the living room discussing what had happened. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching his basketball tightly. Ava clung to Michelle, her wide eyes filled with fear. Kevin paced back and forth, his jaw clenched in frustration. "We need to figure out how to handle this," Kevin said, finally stopping near the window to glance outside. "They're not going to stop unless someone makes them." Michelle nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "But what can we do? Calling the police hasn't helped so far. They'll just deny everything and act like victims." Kevin sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe we talk to the neighbors again," he suggested. "Some of them seem decent. If enough people speak up, maybe the Hensleys will back off." It was a good idea in theory, but putting it into practice proved difficult. While some neighbors offered sympathetic smiles or kind words, few were willing to confront the Hensleys directly. One woman, Mrs. Dawson, shook her head apologetically when Kevin approached her. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I agree with you, it's terrible what they're doing, but I can't risk getting involved. You understand, don't you?" Kevin forced a smile, though disappointment weighed heavily on him. "Of course," he said. "Thank you anyway." Despite the lack of support, the Johnsons refused to give up. They reinforced their resolve to stay strong, knowing that backing down would only embolden the Hensleys further. Kevin rebuilt the mailbox once more after finding it vandalized again. This time adding a small sign above it that read, "Welcome to our home." Patricia saw the sign the next morning and scowled. She muttered under her breath as she walked past, shaking her head in disgust. Carl, meanwhile, devised a new plan to torment the family. That evening, as darkness fell, he cranked up the volume on his stereo system, blasting loud rock music late into the night. The noise rattled the windows of the Johnsons' house, making it impossible for anyone to sleep. Kevin stormed outside, banging on the Hensleys' front door. "Turn it down," he shouted, his patience wearing thin. Carl opened the door, smirking. "What's the matter?" he asked mockingly. "Can't handle a little music? Maybe you're too sensitive for this neighborhood." "It's midnight," Kevin snapped. "Normal people are asleep by now. Turn it off." Carl shrugged, pretending to consider the request. "Tell you what, I'll turn it off if you promise to move out tomorrow. Deal?" Kevin clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. Instead, he turned and walked away, slamming the front door behind him. Inside, Michelle handed him a cup of tea, her expression grim. "This has to stop," she said quietly. "We can't live like this, forever." Kevin nodded, staring into the steam rising from his cup. "I know," he replied, "but I don't know how much longer we can hold out." The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. Kevin had spent the morning mowing the lawn, determined to show the Hensleys that they couldn't intimidate him. As he pushed the mower along the edge of the driveway, Patricia appeared on her porch, watching him with narrowed eyes. Moments later, Carl joined her, holding something in his hand. At first, Kevin didn't notice them. It wasn't until he heard the sharp click of a gun being cocked that he froze, his heart leaping into his throat. Slowly, he turned around to see Carl and Patricia descending their porch steps, both armed with weapons. Patricia carried a shotgun while Carl held a pistol, pointing it directly at Kevin. "Get off our street," Carl snarled, his finger resting dangerously close to the trigger. "You're not welcome here." Kevin raised his hand slowly, his mind racing. "Put the guns down," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "This isn't solving anything." "Maybe not," Carl replied, taking another step forward. "But it sure feels good to finally teach you a lesson." From inside the house, Michelle heard the commotion and rushed to the window, her blood running cold at the sight of the armed couple confronting her husband. Without hesitation, she grabbed the phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she explained the situation to the operator. Meanwhile, Patricia aimed her shotgun at Kevin, her expression twisted with rage. "You brought this on yourself," she hissed. "If you'd just left when we told you to, none of this would have happened." Marcus and Ava huddled together in the living room, tears streaming down their faces as they listened to the chaos unfolding outside. Michelle held them close, whispering reassurances even though her own heart was pounding wildly. Thankfully, help arrived quickly. The sound of sirens echoed through the neighborhood, growing louder with each passing second. Carl and Patricia hesitated, lowering their weapons slightly as two police cars screeched to a halt in front of the houses. Officers jumped out, drawing their own guns and shouting orders for the Hensleys to drop their weapons. Reluctantly, Carl and Patricia complied, dropping the guns onto the grass. They were handcuffed and placed in the back of a squad car, glaring daggers at Kevin as they were driven away. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, some shocked, others relieved that the escalating conflict had finally been addressed. Later that evening, after the adrenaline wore off and the officers finished taking statements, the Johnsons sat together in silence. Kevin stared at the wall, replaying the events in his mind. Michelle rested her head on his shoulder, exhausted but grateful that no one had been hurt. "They're gone. For now," Michelle said softly. "But what happens next? What if they come back angrier than before?" Kevin sighed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We'll deal with it when it comes," he replied. "For now, we focus on keeping ourselves safe. We've done nothing wrong, and we won't let them scare us away." Though the immediate threat had passed, the incident left lasting scars. Marcus struggled to sleep at night, waking up in a cold sweat whenever he dreamed about the guns pointed at his father. Ava became clingy, refusing to leave Michelle's side even for short periods. Kevin and Michelle worked tirelessly to reassure their children, reminding them that love and strength would always overcome hate. In the days that followed, news of the confrontation spread throughout the neighborhood. Some residents expressed outrage at the Hensleys' actions, organizing a meeting to discuss ways to support the Johnsons. Others remained silent, unwilling to take sides. Despite the mixed reactions, the Johnsons felt a renewed sense of hope. For the first time since moving to Tranquil Heights, they realized they weren't entirely alone. There were good people in the community who cared about fairness and equality, even if they hadn't spoken up sooner. As for Carl and Patricia, they posted bail and returned home, unrepentant and furious. They ranted to anyone who would listen about how they were being unfairly treated, blaming the Johnsons for all their troubles. Their bitterness only deepened, setting the stage for further conflict. The arrest of Carl and Patricia Hensley sent shockwaves through Tranquil Heights. News of the incident spread quickly, sparking outrage among neighbors who had previously stayed silent. For weeks, whispers filled the air as residents debated what had happened. Some expressed relief that the couple's hateful behavior had finally been addressed, while others questioned why it had taken so long for action to be taken. Kevin and Michelle Johnson found themselves at the center of the storm. Though grateful for the police intervention, they couldn't shake the fear that lingered in their minds. Every creak of the floorboards or unexpected knock on the door made them tense, wondering if retaliation might come. Marcus stopped playing basketball in the driveway altogether, preferring to stay indoors where he felt safe. Even little Ava seemed quieter than usual, clinging to Michelle whenever strangers passed by. Despite their unease, the Johnsons tried to focus on moving forward. Kevin reinforced the mailbox once more, this time adding a sturdy lock to prevent further vandalism. Michelle planted new flowers in the front yard, determined to reclaim their space with beauty and color. "We're not going to let fear win," she told her children one evening. "This is our home and we deserve to feel happy here." But while the Johnsons worked to rebuild their sense of security, Carl and Patricia Hensley posted bail and returned to the neighborhood. Their faces were red with anger as they stepped out of the courthouse, muttering about how unfairly they had been treated. Patricia clutched a stack of papers detailing their charges: aggravated assault, racial intimidation, and disturbing the peace, and vowed to fight back. "They're lying," Patricia hissed as they drove home. "Those people are trying to ruin us." Carl nodded in agreement, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Don't worry," he growled. "We'll show them. They won't get away with this." Back at their house, the Hensleys wasted no time plotting their next move. They ranted to anyone who would listen, blaming the Johnsons for all their troubles. "They set us up," Patricia insisted to a neighbor who stopped by to check on them. "It's all lies. None of it's true." Most residents avoided engaging with the couple, unwilling to risk becoming targets themselves. But a few sympathized, nodding along as Patricia recounted her version of events. "It's ridiculous," one man said. "People like that shouldn't be allowed to stir up trouble." Encouraged by these reactions, Carl and Patricia doubled down on their animosity. Late one night, as the Johnsons slept, Carl snuck onto their property and spray-painted hateful messages on their garage door. By morning, the entire neighborhood could see the bright red letters screaming accusations of theft and fraud. When Kevin discovered the vandalism, his stomach sank. He stared at the graffiti, his fists clenched in frustration. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" he muttered under his breath. Michelle appeared moments later, gasping when she saw the damage. "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked, tears welling up in her eyes. Kevin sighed, pulling her into a hug. "We'll clean it up," he said firmly. "And then we'll report it to the police. We're not letting them scare us into leaving." With the help of some neighbors, the family scrubbed the paint off the garage door. Others brought over fresh flowers or baked goods as gestures of support. One woman, Mrs. Dawson, even offered to organize a neighborhood watch program to deter future incidents. "We need to stick together," she told Kevin. "If we don't stand up to bullies like the Hensleys, they'll keep pushing until someone breaks." Though touched by the community's solidarity, Kevin knew the situation was far from resolved. The Hensleys' hatred burned brighter than ever, fueled by their belief that they were being persecuted unjustly. Every glance across the street felt like a challenge, every muttered word a threat waiting to explode. Then strange things began happening around the Hensleys' house. At first it was subtle. A flickering light here, a door slamming shut there. Patricia dismissed it as faulty wiring or drafts. but Carl grew increasingly uneasy. "Something's wrong," he muttered one evening as they sat in the living room. "I've never seen lights act like that before." Patricia rolled her eyes. "You're imagining things," she snapped. "Stop being so paranoid." But the occurrences escalated quickly. Shadows moved across walls without explanation. Objects levitated briefly before crashing to the ground. Once Patricia woke up to find her bedroom window wide open, though she was certain she had locked it before going to bed. "This isn't normal," Carl whispered one night after hearing footsteps in the hallway when no one else was home. Patricia wanted to deny it, but deep down, she felt a chill creep up her spine. She remembered hearing stories about haunted houses growing up, tales meant to scare children into behaving. Now those same fears resurfaced, gnawing at her resolve. Desperate for answers, Patricia recalled Evelyn Harper, a local psychic known for helping people deal with unexplainable phenomena. Though skeptical, she decided to visit Evelyn, hoping the woman might offer some insight, or at least peace of mind. Evelyn lived in a small cottage surrounded by towering oak trees. Wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze as Patricia approached the front door. When Evelyn answered, she didn't seem surprised to see her. "You feel it, don't you?" Evelyn asked calmly, gesturing for Patricia to come inside. Patricia hesitated, glancing nervously at the strange symbols etched into the walls. "Feel what?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "The energy," Evelyn replied. "Your actions have awakened something dark, a force tied to your anger and cruelty. It feeds on negativity." Patricia frowned, crossing her arms defensively. "Are you saying this is my fault?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes. You've sown seeds of hatred and intolerance. Now those seeds are growing and they're consuming you." Carl refused to believe any of it when Patricia told him later that evening. "That woman's a fraud," he growled, pacing back and forth in the living room. "She doesn't know anything about us." But the disturbances continued, growing more intense with each passing day. Doors flew open violently. Objects levitated and crashed to the ground. Once Patricia found all the mirrors in the house shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floors. Finally, Carl broke down. He stormed onto the Johnsons' property late one night, determined to put an end to whatever he believed was causing the chaos. If the Johnsons were behind it, and in his mind they had to be, they needed to pay. He crept through the darkness, a crowbar in hand, planning to vandalize their car. As he approached the vehicle parked in the driveway, a blinding white light engulfed him. He froze, shielding his eyes with his arm, but the light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed him entirely. When Patricia woke up the next morning, Carl was gone. Panic set in as she searched the house, calling his name over and over again. She checked every room, every closet, but there was no sign of him. Finally, she ran outside, scanning the street frantically. That's when she spotted his hat lying near the edge of the woods behind their house. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, clutching it tightly to her chest. Tears streamed down her face as she realized something truly terrible had happened. With nowhere else to turn, Patricia went back to Evelyn Harper's cottage. This time, she begged for help. "I'll do what I can," Evelyn said solemnly, grabbing a lantern and motioning for Patricia to follow her. Together they ventured into the woods, guided by faint glowing symbols etched into tree trunks and eerie echoes of Carl's voice calling for help. After walking for what felt like hours, they reached a clearing bathed in an otherworldly glow. In the center stood Carl, or at least a version of him. He appeared trapped within a shimmering void, his face pale and gaunt. His eyes widened when he saw Patricia. "Help me," he cried, reaching out toward her. "Please, get me out of here." Patricia took a step forward, but Evelyn held her back. "You can't free him alone," she explained. "This is karma, a reflection of your own actions. To release him, you must confront the truth about yourself and make amends." Patricia stared at Evelyn, her heart pounding. "What does that mean? What do I have to do?" Evelyn's gaze softened. "Apologize, not just to the Johnsons, but to everyone you've hurt. Take responsibility for your behavior." Only then will the void release him. Back at home, Patricia wrestled with guilt. Memories flooded her mind. Her cruel words, her hateful actions, the way she had treated others with disdain, simply because they were different. For the first time, she questioned whether her beliefs were justified. Was she really better than anyone else? Or had she allowed fear and ignorance to guide her life? Slowly, painfully, Patricia began writing letters of apology. She wrote to the Johnsons, admitting her role in their suffering and expressing genuine remorse. She wrote to neighbors she had insulted or ignored over the years. She even wrote to strangers she had judged unfairly based on appearances. Each word was difficult to put down, but with every sentence she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Exhausted but determined, Patricia delivered the letters personally, starting with the Johnsons. She crossed the street, her knees trembling as she knocked on their front door. Kevin answered, surprised to see her standing there. "Can I help?" "You?" he asked cautiously. Patricia swallowed hard, clutching the envelope in her hands. I came to apologize," she stammered. Weeks passed after Carl and Patricia Hensley returned home from jail, but the neighborhood felt different. The Johnson family had gone about their lives as best they could, trying to move past the trauma of being threatened with guns. Kevin mowed the lawn again on weekends, Michelle tended to her flowers, and Marcus played basketball in the driveway, though he still glanced nervously toward the Hensley's house every now and then. Ava clung to her mother less often, but she still flinched at loud noises. The Hensleys, however, were far from calm. Their anger simmered beneath the surface, boiling over whenever they saw the Johnsons outside. Patricia spent hours pacing inside their house, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. Carl sat on the porch, glaring across the street, nursing a growing obsession with revenge. Then strange things started happening around the Hensleys' house. At first it was small and easy to dismiss, a flickering light here, a door slamming shut there. But soon, the occurrences became harder to ignore. One night, Patricia woke up to find her bedroom window open, even though she was sure she had locked it before going to bed. Another time, Carl heard footsteps in the hallway when no one else was home. Patricia tried to brush it off as drafts, or old wiring acting up. "This house is falling apart," she muttered to herself, though deep down she wasn't convinced. Things escalated quickly. Lights began turning on and off by themselves, even during the day. Shadows moved across walls, without explanation. Once Patricia swore she heard whispers coming from empty rooms, low voices that seemed to say her name over and over again. She told Carl about it, but he dismissed her concerns. "Stop being so paranoid," he snapped. "It's just your imagination." But Carl couldn't deny what happened next. Late one night, as he sat in his armchair watching TV, he heard a loud crash from the corner of the room. He turned his head just in time to see his prized hunting rifle floating mid-air. His eyes widened in horror as the gun hovered for a moment, then dropped to the floor with a deafening thud. "What the hell?" Carl shouted, jumping to his feet. He grabbed the rifle, inspecting it for damage, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, the incident left him shaken. Patricia noticed the change in him immediately. For the first time, fear crept into Carl's expression. "Something's wrong," he admitted reluctantly. "I don't know what it is, but this isn't normal." Desperate for answers, Patricia remembered hearing about Evelyn Harper, a local psychic who lived on the outskirts of town. People said she had a gift for seeing things others couldn't. Though Patricia usually scoffed at such nonsense, she decided to visit Evelyn, hoping she might have some insight into what was happening. Evelyn lived in a small cottage surrounded by towering oak trees. Her front yard was cluttered with wind chimes, crystals, and statues of angels. When Patricia knocked on the door, Evelyn answered almost instantly, as if she'd been expecting her. "You feel it, don't you?" Evelyn asked before Patricia could say a word. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying an air of authority. Patricia hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Feel what?" she finally asked. "The energy," Evelyn replied, stepping aside to let Patricia and your actions have awakened something dark, a force tied to your anger, your hatred. It feeds on negativity. Patricia frowned, crossing her arms defensively. Are you saying this is my fault? Evelyn nodded slowly. Yes. You've sown seeds of cruelty and intolerance. Now those seeds are growing and they're consuming you. Carl refused to believe any of it when Patricia told him later that evening. That woman's a fraud, he growled, pacing back and forth in the living room. She doesn't know anything about us. But the disturbances continued, growing more intense with each passing day. Doors flew open violently. Objects levitated and crashed to the ground. Once, Patricia found all the mirrors in the house shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floors. Finally, Carl broke down. He stormed onto the Johnsons' property late one night, determined to put an end to whatever he believed was causing the chaos. If the Johnsons were behind it, and in his mind they had to be, they needed to pay. He crept through the darkness, a crowbar in hand, planning to vandalize their car. As he approached the vehicle parked in the driveway, a blinding white light engulfed him. He froze, shielding his eyes with his arm, but the light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed him entirely. When Patricia woke up the next morning, Carl was gone. Panic set in as she searched the house, calling his name over and over again. She checked every room, every closet, but there was no sign of him. Finally, she ran outside, scanning the street frantically. That's when she spotted his hat lying near the edge of the woods behind their house. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, clutching it tightly to her chest. Tears streamed down her face as she realized something truly terrible had happened. With nowhere else to turn, Patricia went back to Evelyn Harper's cottage. This time, she begged for help. I'll do what I can, Evelyn said solemnly, grabbing a lantern and motioning for Patricia to follow her. Together, they ventured into the woods, guided by faint glowing symbols etched into tree trunks and eerie echoes of Carl's voice calling for help. After walking for what felt like hours, they reached a clearing bathed in an otherworldly glow. In the center stood Carl, or at least a version of him. He appeared trapped within a shimmering void, his face pale and gaunt. His eyes widened when he saw Patricia. "Help me!" he cried, reaching out toward her. "Please get me out of here." Patricia took a step forward, but Evelyn held her back. "You can't free him alone," she explained. "This is karma, a reflection of your own actions. To release him, you must confront the truth about yourself and make amends." Patricia stared at Evelyn, her heart pounding. "What does that mean? What do I have to do?" Evelyn's gaze softened. "Apologize, not just to the Johnsons, but to everyone you've hurt. Take responsibility for your behavior. Only then will the void release him." Back at home, Patricia wrestled with guilt, with memories flooded her mind. Her cruel words, her hateful actions, the way she had treated others with disdain simply because they were different. For the first time, she questioned whether her beliefs were justified. Was she really better than anyone else? Or had she allowed fear and ignorance to guide her life? Slowly, painfully, Patricia began writing letters of apology. She wrote to the Johnsons, admitting her role in their suffering and expressing genuine remorse. She wrote to neighbors she had insulted or ignored over the years. She even wrote to strangers she had judged unfairly based on appearances. Each word was difficult to put down, but with every sentence, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Exhausted but determined, Patricia delivered the letters personally, starting with the Johnsons. She crossed the street, her knees trembling as she knocked on their front door. Kevin answered, surprised to see her standing there. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. Patricia swallowed hard, clutching the envelope in her hands. I came to apologize," she stammered. "For everything. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I'm sorry." Kevin studied her face, searching for sincerity. After a moment, he nodded. "Thank you," he said simply. Though forgiveness didn't come easily, Kevin accepted her apology, not for her sake, but for his own peace of mind. He knew holding on to anger would only poison him. just as it had poisoned the Hensleys. As Patricia walked away, she felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. Maybe redemption was possible after all. Patricia Hensley returned home after delivering her apology to the Johnsons, her heart heavy, but lighter than it had been in years. She sat alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at the empty chair where Carl used to sit. The house felt eerily quiet without him, and the strange occurrences that had plagued them for weeks seemed to have paused, for now. She replayed the conversation with Kevin Johnson in her mind. His calm acceptance of her apology had caught her off guard. She expected anger, resentment, even rejection. Instead, he had simply nodded and said, "Thank you." Those two words carried more weight than she could have imagined, forcing her to confront the depth of her own cruelty. But while Patricia's guilt began to ease, Carl remained trapped in the shimmering void deep within the woods. Evelyn Harper had warned her that freeing him required more than just apologies. It demanded genuine remorse and a willingness to change. Patricia knew this was her chance not only to save Carl, but also to redeem herself. The next morning, Patricia decided to take action. She gathered the remaining letters of apology she had written and delivered them personally to neighbors she had wronged over the years. Some accepted her words with cautious optimism. Others turned her away, their distrust too deeply rooted. Still, Patricia persisted, determined to make amends however she could. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Dawson, listened quietly as Patricia explained her regret. "I wasn't always kind to you," Patricia admitted, her voice trembling. "I judged you unfairly because I thought I was better than you. But I see now how wrong I was." Mrs. Dawson studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," she said. "I hope you mean what you say." Patricia left Mrs. Dawson's house feeling a sense of relief she hadn't known in years. Each apology brought her closer to understanding the harm she had caused, not just to others but to herself. For so long she had let hatred consume her, blinding her to the humanity of those around her. Now for the first time she saw clearly. Meanwhile, Evelyn Harper prepared for a ritual to free Carl from the void. She instructed Patricia to bring items symbolizing redemption: a candle, a mirror, and a piece of fabric torn from one of Carl's shirts. When Patricia arrived at Evelyn's cottage later that evening, the psychic greeted her with a solemn expression. "This won't be easy," Evelyn warned. "Carl is trapped because of your shared anger and prejudice. To release him, you must face your darkest truths and vow to live differently moving forward." Patricia nodded, clutching the items tightly. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice betrayed her fear. Evelyn led Patricia back into the woods, the lantern casting flickering shadows on the trees. They walked in silence until they reached the clearing where Carl was trapped. The shimmering void still hovered in the center, its light pulsating like a heartbeat. Inside, Carl's face was gaunt, his eyes hollow with despair. "Patricia!" he shouted as soon as he saw her. "Get me out of here, please!" Patricia stepped closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Carl," she whispered. "This is all my fault. I let my hatred control me, and now we're paying the price." Evelyn placed the candle, mirror, and fabric in a circle around the void. She lit the candle and handed Patricia the mirror, instructing her to look into it. "See yourself as you truly are," Evelyn said. "Acknowledge the pain you've caused and promise to change." Patricia hesitated, afraid of what she might see. But when she finally gazed into the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Her reflection looked worn and broken, weighed down by years of bitterness. "I'm sorry," Patricia murmured, speaking to both her reflection and the universe. "I'm sorry for hating people who didn't deserve it. I'm sorry for letting fear guide my life. I promise to do better, to be better." As she spoke, the void began to shift. Its light grew brighter, enveloping Carl in a warm glow. Slowly, he emerged from the void, collapsing onto the ground in front of Patricia. For a moment, Neither of them moved. Then Carl looked up at Patricia, his eyes filled with confusion and gratitude. "What happened?" he asked weakly. "You were trapped because of our hatred," Patricia replied, helping him to his feet. "But I've apologized for everything. I want to change, Carl. Do you?" Carl hesitated, glancing at Evelyn, who stood silently watching. Finally, he nodded. "I don't know if I can undo everything I've done," he admitted. "But I'll try." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's all anyone can ask of you," she said. "Remember, actions speak louder than words. Prove your remorse through kindness and humility." The journey back to their house was quiet, each step heavy with the weight of what they had endured. Patricia held Carl's hand tightly, afraid he might disappear again if she let go. When they finally reached home, they sat together in the living room surrounded by the remnants of their old lives. "We need to start over," Patricia said softly. "Not just here, but everywhere. We can't keep living the way we did before." Carl nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Where do we begin?" Patricia thought for a moment before answering. "With honesty. We tell the truth about who we are and what we've done, and we work every day to be better." Over the following weeks, Carl and Patricia worked tirelessly to rebuild their lives. They attended community meetings, volunteering their time to help neighbors and participating in discussions about diversity and inclusion. At first, many residents were skeptical, unwilling to trust them after years of hostility. But Patricia and Carl persisted, showing up consistently and proving through their actions that they meant to change. One evening, during a neighborhood potluck, Patricia approached Kevin and Michelle Johnson. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," she said sincerely. "I know I don't deserve it, but I promise to keep working toward being someone worthy of forgiveness." Kevin nodded, offering a small smile. "We all make mistakes," he replied. "What matters is learning from them." Michelle added, "Your efforts haven't gone unnoticed. Keep going, you're making a difference." Though the road ahead was long, Patricia and Carl committed themselves to education and advocacy. They joined local groups focused on racial equality and social justice, using their experiences to teach others about the dangers of prejudice. Their transformation inspired some neighbors to reflect on their own biases, sparking meaningful conversations throughout Tranquil Heights. Back at home, the Johnson family continued to thrive. Marcus played basketball freely in the driveway, no longer glancing nervously across the street. Ava laughed as she chased butterflies in the yard, her fear replaced by joy. Kevin and Michelle worked together to create a welcoming environment for everyone in the neighborhood, hosting gatherings that celebrated diversity and unity. Even the Hensleys' house began to feel different. The strange occurrences stopped entirely, replaced by a peaceful stillness. Patricia often found herself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset and reflecting on how far they had come. Though scars remained, both visible and invisible, they served as reminders of resilience, compassion, and the power of redemption. In the end, the ordeal brought unexpected growth to Tranquil Heights. What had once been a divided community became stronger, united by a shared commitment to kindness and understanding. And though challenges lay ahead, the residents faced them together, knowing that love and forgiveness could overcome even the deepest wounds. Months passed, and Tranquil Heights transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The once tense neighborhood now buzzed with activity, as residents came together to rebuild trust and foster unity. The Johnson family remained at the heart of this change, their resilience inspiring others to embrace diversity and kindness. Yet the journey wasn't without its challenges, and the scars left by Carl and Patricia Hensley's actions still lingered, for them and for the community. Carl and Patricia continued working hard to prove they had changed. Every morning, Carl joined a local volunteer group that cleaned up parks and repaired public spaces. He didn't speak much during these outings, but his willingness to roll up his sleeves and get his hands dirty earned him cautious respect from some neighbors. Patricia, meanwhile, spent her days organizing workshops on racial sensitivity and empathy. She shared her story openly, admitting her past mistakes and encouraging others to confront their own biases. At first, many people were hesitant to accept their efforts, Some neighbors avoided them altogether, while others watched closely, waiting for signs of insincerity. But over time, small gestures began to break down barriers. One day, Mrs. Dawson stopped Patricia after a workshop and offered her a warm smile. "You're doing good work," she said simply. Those few words meant more to Patricia than she could express. For Kevin and Michelle Johnson, seeing the Hensleys, transformation was bittersweet. On one hand, they appreciated the couple's attempts to make amends. On the other hand, the memories of threats and hostility were hard to forget. Marcus still flinched whenever he saw Carl walking down the street, and Ava clung to Michelle when Patricia approached. Kevin understood their fears but encouraged patience. "Change takes time," he told his family one evening. "It's not about forgetting what happened, it's about deciding whether we want to move forward or stay stuck in anger." Michelle nodded, holding Ava close. "I just hope they mean it this time," she said softly. Despite lingering doubts, the Johnsons welcomed opportunities to engage with the Hensleys when appropriate. During a community picnic, Michelle exchanged pleasantries with Patricia, discussing recipes and gardening tips. Kevin struck up a conversation with Carl about home repairs, offering advice on fixing a leaky faucet. These interactions, though brief, marked progress toward healing old wounds. As summer turned to fall, the neighborhood celebrated its newfound sense of harmony with an annual harvest festival. Tables lined the streets laden with homemade pies, roasted vegetables, and steaming pots of chili. Children ran through piles of leaves, laughing as parents looked on. For the first time in years, everyone felt included. During the festival, Patricia stood nervously behind a booth she had set up to promote her workshops. A steady stream of curious neighbors stopped by, asking questions and sharing stories. When Kevin approached with Marcus and Ava, Patricia froze, unsure how to react. "Hi," Kevin said, smiling warmly. "Mind if we grab some flyers? I think these would be great for the school board meeting next week." Patricia blinked, surprised by his kindness. "Of course," she replied, handing him a stack of papers. "Thank you for supporting this." Marcus tugged on Kevin's sleeve, whispering, "Dad, can we go now?" Kevin knelt beside him, keeping his voice gentle. "Remember what we talked about, buddy? People can change if they really try. Let's give her a chance, okay?" Marcus hesitated before nodding reluctantly. It wasn't easy for him to trust someone who had once threatened his father, but he trusted Kevin's judgment. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the entire neighborhood gathered around. A bonfire in the park. Evelyn Harper, who had played such a pivotal role in resolving the conflict, addressed the crowd. "This year has been difficult for all of us," she began, her voice carrying over the crackling flames. "But it has also taught us something important, that hate doesn't disappear overnight, but neither does love. Together, we've shown that forgiveness and understanding are stronger than fear and division." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. Even Carl, sitting quietly near the back with Patricia, felt a lump rise in his throat. He glanced at Kevin, who sat surrounded by his family, and felt a pang of regret. How different things might have been if he hadn't let hatred blind him. After Evelyn finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause. Music played softly in the background, and neighbors danced under the stars, celebrating their shared commitment to a brighter future. The following weeks brought even more positive changes. Carl and Patricia sold their house, deciding it was best to start fresh elsewhere. Before leaving, they hosted a small gathering at their home, inviting neighbors to say goodbye. To everyone's surprise, several people attended, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely wished the couple well. "You've come a long way," Kevin said as he shook Carl's hand. "Don't lose sight of the person you're becoming." Carl nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," he replied, "for everything." Patricia hugged Michelle tightly, apologizing one last time. "Take care of yourselves," she whispered. When the moving truck finally pulled away, taking Carl and Patricia to a new chapter in their lives, the neighborhood felt lighter, as though a heavy weight had been lifted. In the months that followed, life in Tranquil Heights settled into a peaceful rhythm. The Johnsons thrived, their home becoming a symbol of strength and perseverance. Marcus joined the school basketball team, scoring his first basket to thunderous applause from proud parents. Ava made friends easily, her bubbly personality winning over classmates. Kevin and Michelle often hosted barbecues, welcoming neighbors into their backyard to share food and laughter. Though the Hensleys were gone, their story served as a reminder of the power of redemption and the importance of standing against hate. Neighbors continued attending workshops and discussions, committed to fostering a community built on inclusivity and respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, Kevin stood on his porch, watching Marcus shoot hoops in the driveway. The golden sunlight bathed the scene in warmth, painting a picture of tranquility. Michelle joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "We made it," she said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. Kevin smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, we did, and look how far we've come." Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had strengthened their bond as a family and deepened their connection to the community. They knew challenges would arise again. Life rarely stayed smooth forever, but they faced the future with confidence, knowing they could overcome anything together. As the wind rustled through the trees, carrying fallen leaves across the lawn, Kevin thought about the lessons they had learned. Hatred could destroy, but love and forgiveness could heal. Compassion could bridge divides, and courage could inspire change. And so, Tranquil Heights entered a new era, one defined not by fear or prejudice, but by hope, resilience, and unity.